Yo, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? This is Stardust here. Welcome back to another video, and today I wanted to talk about Marvel's Avengers and are they rewriting history? Now, I have noticed recently that the Marvel's Avengers Twitter account has been posting these kind of marketing things, doing a countdown to 2022 with a trip down memory lane of the year that we have had. Now, this year has had so many downs and only a few ups, so I was very curious about the way they were going to approach this, whether they were going to be quite honest about how the year has been, or they were going to be very sort of like, oh yeah, we released this, and Hawkeye mains, let's go, and this has been great, and stuff like that. And I wanted to kind of go through each of the steps they've taken so far, because that isn't the approach I believe they should have had. Now, what I mean by that is, and I'll explain a bit more as we go through them, that this year hasn't been the best at all, right? In no stretch of the imagination has this been a good year for the game. It's been a better year, but that wasn't really like, that's not really a fair comparison given the few months we only had in year one, when they spent the majority of their time fixing bugs, and obviously Kate Bishop managed to release after a delay. So realistically, this year was always going to be better than the last one anyway, right? So what I wanted to do was I wanted to go through each of the steps, and I wanted to say how they actually were, right? So I wanted to review them a little bit and kind of actually give you guys who are a bit new to the game genuine context to everything that's happened here, because it's clear that Marvel's Avengers don't really have any kind of leeway, to be honest, about how this year has actually gone, which is a bit disappointing in my opinion. So let's count down to 2022 with the trip down memory lane of the year we had. Well, a better way to start than with the introduction of Hawkeye in March that put the rest of the age-old question, where's Hawkeye? Hawkeye mains, raise your arrows. Now, for anyone wondering about this where's Hawkeye thing, let me tell you exactly where that came from. So when there's a Marvel's Avengers game and you're missing one of the core Avengers in kind of like the modern era, right? That's Hawkeye, and he was nowhere to be found, right? He's even in the campaign, he has a photo of himself in the campaign, and he was still nowhere to be found. But everyone just wanted to know, you know, where is Hawkeye? Where is one of the core Avengers to the team? It doesn't make any sense to have a Marvel's Avengers game and probably not stick Hawkeye in there, you know what I mean? And that made total sense. So when they introduced Hawkeye, they were like, oh, here's Hawkeye, he's going to be one of our first DLC characters. People were like, okay, it's a bit weird, because realistically, he should be one of the core Avengers. So that's kind of where that where's Hawkeye thing came from. Now, this DLC expansion was about, story-wise, I want to say an hour and a half long, 2 hours if you're really pushing the exploration. Hawkeye still got bugs to this day. For example, his locked-on mechanic aims at the feet, which is really weird for a hero that's supposed to never be able to miss. His heroics still sometimes don't trigger, which is again a core aspect of his builds and character, and a majority of his character is spamming triangle, right, or spamming whatever the equivalent would be to do your power attacks. So he's an okay hero, still got loads of bugs. The campaign wasn't worth much. It was a very lackluster experience, especially when we had to wait from December to March to even play this story, which, I'll be honest, from this point onwards, I kind of realised that maybe the story wasn't exactly for me, because the storytelling just wasn't hitting the same, you know what I mean? Like, for example, Kate Bishop had a really fun story in December that I've got to say, it was actually, I actually really enjoyed it. But here, Kate just decided to become a massive, like, dickhead, and just everything she was saying towards Clint just come across really sarcastic and mean, and I was just like, that's kind of, yeah, so it ruined Kate a lot, and I know that Taskmaster was supposed to have a fight in this, but it got cut because of complaints. But in my honest opinion, Taskmaster showing up and then just disappearing out of thin air kind of made the story feel like it had a massive space in it, and I would rather you tell the story that you wanted to tell rather than half-arse it and make it look worse because of that fact. But that's just me. So I would have given this, you know, maybe the cleanest content to release, but you know, it still wasn't like fantastic, right? So here we got the same day when you choose Hawkeye in March, we released the PS5 and Xbox Series XS versions of Marvel's Avengers. Is this what the future feels like? Now, I will say that from PS4 to PS5, the game feels incredibly different. The frame rate was improved by so much, because when I was on my PS4, let me tell you guys, the frame rate was awful. Like, it was absolutely terrible. The game did not run well at all, and I had to go on next-gen systems to be able to fix that issue, which didn't really feel right to me, but, you know, it is what it is. But I would say that, you know, the bugs aside, right, that are still very evident on the PlayStation 5, I am definitely glad that at least the frame rate felt better and there was a few more options and stuff like that. Okay, so on to the next step of the thing. So in April, we started our very first event, the Tachyon anomaly event. This was the first time that we allowed more than one of the same hero to be played in the same strike team, and resulted in some wacky clips. Now, I think this was the best event we have ever had in Marvel's Avengers. I will say that now. Doesn't mean it was great. There's still so much they need to improve on events. This event was essentially mission chains galore, which got very tedious because mission chains are naturally quite boring, and once you completed the event, there is nothing left for you to do. You're left very hollow, and eventually playing with the same heroes loses that luster after a while. But it did reward multiplayer play, which gave the, you know, multiplayer a bit of a tester, which means more people went online. And, you know, they were alright. There was a lot of clips and stuff like that. There was a lot of sort of, like, you know, community kind of companionship, doing, like, cool little team-ups and stuff like that. They did, however, completely ruin the event by allowing all heroes to be played at the same time. Now, it was a necessity, because matchmaking was awful, and it definitely, I don't know if it improved it too much, but it definitely was a needed thing. I just think that it kind of lost its luster for the event when they brought it back, and it's like, well, dudes, guess what? We can do the whole point of this event, right? The theme of this event was meant to be allowing everyone to play as the same hero in the strike team, and then it kind of just, yeah, it kind of didn't work, if you know what I mean. Like, because there's so many different variants they could have done of this. Like, when Spider-Man released, they could have done a cool Spider-Verse thing and stuff like that. So, I'd say that it was a, like, for a first event, it was good, but when you look at other games who have done it better, it was kind of like, you know, it was a 50-50 thing. I think that they kind of withdrew their own hype with it by making making it permanent, but I also get why they did it at the same time. So, this was where I wanted to talk about it. So, there was a bug for a lot of people where they couldn't get past Wave 1, right, when this first started, which meant they couldn't get the rewards, couldn't get the nameplate, etc, etc, etc. Marvel's Avengers essentially came out after this and said that we won't be able to fix it until the event was over, and there was no mention of compensation. And the compensation you did get was that you got your nameplate back. There was nothing to do with gear, there was nothing to do with that. So what they did was they were essentially like, yo, we'll wait until you guys can replay it again. And that was absolutely unacceptable, and I made my voice very heard about that situation. I thought it was disgusting and a complete pathetic excuse or a response to people that couldn't play your game because of a bug that, you know, you allowed to seep through, right? It's nothing to do with the player in the near slightest, right? I got lucky, but it doesn't mean I wasn't upset for other people. So what they did was they brought it back, but there was bugs then, right? And some people had similar issues, and recently people had a similar issue where they couldn't get past Wave 1. Of course, any compensation they did get would be something really bad, like fragments or polychoron and stuff like that. Absolutely pathetic. The idea is very sort of boring, I believe. I think that, like, the mission chains, again, boring mission chains, the kind of, and Yelena being advertised throughout was clearly a ploy to, you know, for the Black Widow movie to kind of bring people in who maybe would be expecting to see Yelena but wouldn't see her at all. She is literally visible once. She's not visible at all, right? And the only time you ever get to see any sort of story build up with Yelena is via text, okay? So that's a joke for starters. There was no earnable skins. They just, essentially, a lot of the advertisement for the event was showcasing the skins in the marketplace, which just wasn't good enough. You know, there was so much more they could have done with this. Maybe if they had more time, but I think that the Techno Lava thing was kind of cool. A lot of it was, you know, the harm rooms themselves were interesting, but, like, they should have made it maybe like, I think they should have done more of an escape room thing, so, like, they're miniature missions, so you had to get to the end of, like, an obstacle course. Maybe each one's different. Maybe you had to, like, you know, you had to like jump over obstacles to get to a certain bit, test like your parkour skills and stuff like that, use each of your heroes' abilities to the best possible thing, like maybe if a fly you have to dodge way more, maybe if you're wall running there's a different avenue to go down. Like, I feel like there was a lot more they could have done to make this genuinely feel like a spy sort of atmosphere, you know what I mean? But they went with techno lava and they went with little exploding hazards and stuff like that, and they just made it waves, which, I mean, it's okay, but it definitely kind of, I think the mission change, the lack of Yelena and stuff like that really weighed it down, because we know in the harm rooms you're able to go into as a different Avenger, right? Because Kamala did it with Iron Man in the campaign. So a lot of people are like, oh, what if we fight, the evil version of the Avengers that Yelena have had? It was nothing like that. We all thought way too creatively into it. Here's the Cosmic Cube. Now, again, similar to the Red Room Takeover, the first time round was a complete disaster. Even though it was only a day, which I will say they fixed it quickly, the bug that happened was absolutely unacceptable. Now, the bug that came from this was that if you tried to play the game, I believe, I don't know if it was console exclusive, you'll have to forgive me for that. I do believe that PC didn't have this problem, but I do think it was an Xbox and PlayStation thing, but again, I could be wrong, please correct me down below. But this allowed, basically, the screen to bounce around a piece of text. Now, on that screen, where your text was bouncing about, it was actually your IP address. Now, if you guys don't know what your IP address is, that ain't good, right? No one wants to, you shouldn't be showing your IP address to no one, right? Especially not on the World Wide Web. So Marvel's Avengers basically come out and said, guys, do not stream our game. But bearing in mind, they didn't do this straight away. Like, people had to literally beg and be like, guys, IP address, and it was only a few hours later where they were like, oh, okay, sorry about that, whoops, because everyone was making such a big deal out of it, and it was awful, and, like, no one could stream the new content, no one could do anything like that. Marvel's Avengers literally had to sort of go on shutdown for a little bit social media-wise until they fixed it, which they did relatively quickly, but by then, the experience was already relatively dampened. But I will say, though, that the villain sector itself was actually, it was good fun, and I think it was a good step in the right direction. I will say that, though. So I believe, yeah, there you go. So that was all that Marvel's Avengers posted about on their lead up to 2022 so far. I would imagine that they're going to go through the OLT, which the Omega level threat didn't actually reward gear at first. I remember myself, Mr. High Ruler, Sonic Photo, and the Brown Bull played it. We beat the Super Adaptoid in an inch of its life and got no rewards from it at all. Like, the mission chain wasn't there. And we had to replay it to finally get our rewards, and then, there was obviously, we still have crashes, we still have bugs galore to this day. War for Wakanda was called an expansion, even though it was essentially a buffed up operation. There was no endgame content to come from that. The raid obviously filled with bugs and stuff like that, and to this day I'm still struggling to find a piece of content that released that was up to a good standard, and so on and so forth. Like, I know that sounds incredibly negative, but in my honest opinion, the best thing for Marvel's Avengers to have done is not sort of just make out that these things went down perfectly. They should have done what they learned from this experience, what went wrong, what they're going to improve, in the future. They should learn how they should express what they learned from these experiences, because I believe it's been a bit disingenuous to act like this year has gone great. But that's my personal thoughts anyway. But let me know what you guys think down below. Let me know if I'm being too harsh on this situation, because obviously I love conversation, I love chatting with you all. Thank you guys for watching this video, and I really do appreciate it. I'll see you in a bit.